Okay, so I just finished your book, which was incredibly compelling and moving, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's the reaction been since it came out? What have you heard from people?
Well, I was terrified to actually put this book out there, and in fact, every night woke up in the middle of the night and thought to myself, "That's it. I'm going to call the publisher and say, never mind. You can't stop the presses." But I never anticipated the reaction that I am still getting, actually. I hear from somebody every day, without exaggeration. They either stop me in the street or at the gym or at the airport, or I get a letter or an email or a message on Facebook or Twitter from somebody who read my book and finally got help, or somebody who read my book and finally understood their alcoholic mother or father, who read my book and were able to reach out to a colleague. And I feel incredibly gratified for that, because I've been able to take what was for me a very dark, hard chapter in my life and make something good come out of it. So.
And is that partly what it's about? One of the things you talked about in the book, and it seemed to be a turning point for you, is at the center you went through this exercise where I think you were blindfolded and you had to find your way out. Yeah. And the key was you had to ask for help. And tell me about what that message was there for you and for anybody who's dealing with, either anxiety disorder or alcoholism or anything.
Well, I can tell you that the people who are suffering from anxiety, the number one mental health issue in our country, or addiction, which is an epidemic of extreme proportions now in this country, every person going through that feels like they're all alone in it. Sometimes it's true. I mean, there are many, many people who shun the addict, who say, "Get out! You can't live here. You can't work here. You can't be here. Out with you." But even those of us who manage to be very highly functioning in every other aspect of our lives, because we're perfectionists and we work so hard at it, and we're keeping this terrible dark secret inside of us, and it eats away at you. These aren't small problems, anxiety and addiction. They're life-threatening issues, and we should be able to reach out and talk about it. And that's, writing my book was the ultimate way I did talk about it. I talked about it with Diane Sawyer in an hour-long special. I talk about it in speeches that I give around the country, on a regular basis now, because it's a huge issue for a lot of people. And believe it or not, around it all is shame. People don't want to be seen as weak or flawed or in some way not right. It's embarrassing to be anxious in an elevator where the doors are taking too long to open, for example, and everybody else is fine. So anxiety is something that people keep hidden, and they don't talk about it openly. And there is such relief when you can say to somebody, "I'm just feeling a little bit anxious, give me a minute." And then that person can maybe even help you in that moment and say the right things that need to be said. But most importantly, it's the bottling it up and stuffing it down that is so destructive.
Now, how do you think that we can, as a society, destigmatize anxiety and
by recognizing that it is a true mental health disorder, and that more people, many people suffer from it. You are not alone. It is a normal thing to sometimes feel anxious. And when the anxiety is too much for you to handle, you can take steps to talk, to get that under control, whether you work with a doctor or a therapist or just start opening up and talking to people. But so many times, and 60% of women who are alcoholics, it's because they were anxious. They were drank because they were anxious. And, addiction is a tremendous, terrible disease in this country. And for decades, the AMA has recognized it as a disease. And yet there are far too many families and companies and organizations in our country who don't treat it like a disease. They treat it like a character flaw or a moral failing or some sort of weakness, and it's not.
It seems like what you said in your book is that your family was very supportive of you.
My parents and my brother and my sister were.
Right, when
yes.
they knew. What can friends who recognize signs in their friends of possible issues, whether it's anxiety, whether it's some kind of an addiction, what can a friend do to help a friend?
You know, I think just asking them, are you okay? I saw this, you know, happen to you, if it's after the fact or in the middle of it, are you okay? But whatever you're going to say to them, oftentimes it's just, I noticed you were having a really hard time. You seemed really shaky. Are you okay? Or I noticed that you've been drinking a lot lately. Is everything all right? You know, do it in a way from a place of concern and compassion, and not a place of judgment and shaming. Because that, you know, there's a brand new study out just last week that said shaming people who are addicted to a substance actually will cause them to relapse. It is the most destructive thing you can do to a person suffering from addiction, is to shame them.
Now, one more question that's not so related to this, and that's if you can offer any words of advice to women who are going through a career transition, about how to build your confidence up so that you can take on a new project or a new direction. Anything from your experience that you can give advice on this?
Well, I haven't changed my profession. I'm still doing what I've always been doing. I just recently changed companies, and even just changing companies was very traumatic and dramatic for me, because I had been at ABC News for, 22 years, a long time. I think the key to any sort of transition like that is to recognize that it's going to be rocky, and be gentle with yourself. And if you're feeling stressed out or flustered or off balance by the change, to just give yourself permission to feel that way. Because, this whole ideal of I shouldn't be feeling this way and I should be dealing with this, just fine, is what gets people into a cycle of depression, anxiety, and addiction. Being a little bit more gentle with ourselves, like, okay, this is tough. This is tough to leave, a job that you've had for 22 years to go to a new company, and they do things differently, and having to navigate that and get used to that. And you're not going to get through it if you're constantly judging yourself for having these feelings of frustration or disorientation or even sadness. You have to give yourself permission to have those feelings. You're human. And I think a lot of times we require a lot of things from ourselves that are way too demanding. We can't be perfect all the time. We're not the only person who had a job change. It was interesting when I changed jobs recently, I all of a sudden remembered all these other people who had recently changed jobs, who had left ABC to go to NBC or to go to Discovery or to go to Nat Geo. And I remembered I hadn't reached out to a single one of them to say, hey, are you okay? How's it going? Let's have lunch. Because it never occurred to me, because I hadn't been through that yet. Recently, we had somebody who lost her job, a woman that I had worked with briefly, but I really enjoyed her and thought she was really talented. And when she lost her job, I reached out to her. And I said, let's go have lunch. If you need a reference, put me on the top of the list. You're really bright and you're really great. You're going to find another job. So I was able to do for her what I might have needed, but I didn't recognize because I'd never walked that path. So in many ways, when we face difficult times, take note of how you feel, so that next time you see somebody else who might be going through that, reach out to them. You never know how much you're going to help somebody by just sending a quick note, or making a quick call, or scheduling a quick lunch. It can be a big difference.
It's nice to feel like other people care, no matter what.
Yeah. I think the whole thing any human being wants in life is to be seen, authentically be seen. And I think a lot of times you sort of blithely and blindly go through life not seeing people and seeing what they're going through.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.